Maria Santos wiped the sweat from her forehead as she scrubbed the marble floors of the Henderson mansion. The 23-year-old woman had been working as a housekeeper for the wealthy family for 3 years, sending most of her earnings back home to support her sick mother and younger siblings in their small village. Every morning, she woke up at 5 to begin her duties, cleaning the enormous house from top to bottom before the family even stirred from their beds. The Henderson family lived in luxury that Maria could never imagine. Mrs. Catherine Henderson, a socialite who spent her days shopping and attending charity events, barely acknowledged Maria's existence. Mr. Robert Henderson, a successful lawyer, was always buried in his work and treated the household staff like invisible servants. Their teenage daughter Emma was spoiled and demanding, often leaving messes for Maria to clean up without a word of thanks. Maria had learned to be invisible in their world. She moved quietly through the halls, completed her tasks efficiently, and never complained about the long hours or difficult conditions. The small room she lived in the basement was cramped and cold, but it was better than the alternatives she had back home. She saved every penny she could, dreaming of one day opening a small restaurant in her village where her family could work together. On this particular Tuesday morning, something felt different in the Henderson household. Mrs. Henderson was pacing around the living room, speaking loudly on her phone about some important business deal that her husband was working on. Maria continued her work, polishing the expensive furniture and arranging the fresh flowers that were delivered every other day. She had learned not to listen too carefully to family conversations, but it was impossible to ignore the tension in the air. As she was dusting the family photographs on the mantelpiece, Maria accidentally knocked over a small crystal vase, crashed to the floor, shattering into dozens of pieces. Her heart sank as she looked at the broken glass scattered across the Persian rug. She knew this vase was one of Mrs. Henderson's prized possessions, inherited from her grandmother, and worth more money than Maria made in 6 months. Mrs. Henderson's scream echoed through the house when she discovered the broken vase. She stormed into the living room, her face red with anger, and began shouting at Maria. The young woman tried to explain that it was an accident, that she would pay for the damage, but Mrs. Henderson was beyond reason. She accused Maria of being careless, ungrateful, and unfit to work in their home. The situation escalated quickly when Mr. Henderson joined the confrontation. He was already stressed about his business dealings, and the broken vase became the final straw. Without listening to Maria's side of the story, he decided that she could no longer be trusted with their valuable belongings. He gave her 30 minutes to pack her things and leave the property immediately. Maria felt her world crashing down around her. She had nowhere to go, no savings to fall back on, and no way to explain to her family why the money would stop coming. She packed her few belongings into a small suitcase, her hands shaking as she folded her worn clothes. The other household staff watched sadly, but could not risk their own jobs by defending her. As she walked down the long driveway of the Henderson mansion for the last time, Maria felt overwhelmed by uncertainty. The city was expensive, and finding another job without references would be nearly impossible. She had always been strong and determined, but this moment tested her resolve like never before. The rain began to fall as she reached the main road, soaking through her thin jacket and making her situation feel even more desperate. With nowhere else to go, Maria made her way to the city center, hoping to find a cheap place to stay for the night. She had enough money for maybe a week in a small hotel, but after that, she would need to figure out a plan. The streets were busy with people hurrying to their jobs, all of them seeming to have purpose and direction, while she felt completely lost. She found a small diner near the bus station and ordered the cheapest item on the menu, a cup of coffee and a piece of toast. As she sat in the corner booth, Maria tried to think about her next steps. She could return to her village, but that would mean admitting failure to her family and giving up on the dreams she had worked so hard to achieve. Or she could stay in the city and try to find another job, though without references, it would be an uphill battle. The diner was warm and welcoming, a stark contrast to the cold formality of the Henderson mansion. The waitress, an older woman, with kind eyes, noticed Maria's distress and struck up a conversation. She learned about Maria's situation and offered some practical advice about finding work in the city. She even mentioned that her cousin owned a small cleaning company that might be hiring. As the day wore on, Maria began to feel a small spark of hope returning. She realized that maybe losing her job at the Henderson house was not the end of the world, but perhaps an opportunity for a fresh start. She had always been hardworking and honest, qualities that would serve her well no matter where she ended up working. That evening, as Maria checked into a small, modest hotel near the downtown area, she made a promise to herself. She would not let this setback define her future. She would find a way to rebuild her life, support her family, and maybe even achieve some of those dreams she had been nurturing for years. Little did she know that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined, and that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the most unexpected opportunities. The next morning, Maria woke up with determination burning in her chest. She had spent the night making lists of potential employers and planning her job search strategy. After a simple breakfast at the hotel's small cafe, she set out to explore the city with fresh eyes, seeing it not as a place where she had failed, but as a place full of new possibilities. Her first stop was the cleaning company that the diner waitress had mentioned. The office was located in a busy commercial district, surrounded by tall office buildings and bustling with morning commuters. Maria straightened her best dress, took a deep breath, and walked through the glass doors with confidence she did not entirely feel. The receptionist was polite but explained that they were not currently hiring full-time staff. However, she mentioned that they often had day jobs available for special events and emergency cleanings. Maria left her contact information and asked to be called for any available work, no matter how small. It was not the permanent solution she needed, but it was a start. As she walked through the business district, Maria noticed the stark contrast between this area and the residential neighborhood where she had worked for the Henderson family. Here, people moved with purpose and energy. Street vendors sold coffee and pastries to office workers rushing to their jobs. The atmosphere was alive with possibility, even though Maria felt like an outsider looking in. She stopped at several hotels and office buildings, inquiring about housekeeping positions. Most managers were kind, but explained that they required references from previous employers. When Maria mentioned that she had worked for a private family, they would nod politely and say they would keep her resume on file, which she knew was a polite way of saying no. By midday, Maria's feet were sore from walking in her only pair of dress shoes, and her confidence was beginning to waver. She found a small park near the financial district and sat on a bench to rest and eat the sandwich she had packed from the hotel. As she watched the people around her enjoying their lunch breaks, she felt the weight of her situation settling on her shoulders. That afternoon, she decided to try a different approach. Instead of focusing only on large companies, she began visiting smaller businesses, family-owned restaurants, and local shops. At a small Italian restaurant, the owner seemed interested in her work ethic, but explained that business had been slow and he could not afford to hire additional help. At a boutique clothing store, the manager was sympathetic but said they only hired people with retail experience. As the day was coming to an end, Maria was walking past a luxury hotel when she noticed a commotion near the entrance. A well-dressed woman was arguing loudly with a man in a chauffeur's uniform about some spilled coffee on her expensive handbag. The woman was clearly upset, and other hotel guests were staring at the scene with curiosity and discomfort. Without thinking, Maria approached the situation and offered to help clean the handbag. She had experience with luxury items from her time at the Henderson mansion and knew how to treat expensive leather goods. The woman looked skeptical at first, but Maria's calm demeanor and confident approach convinced her to accept the help. Using techniques she had learned from caring for Mrs. Henderson's belongings, Maria carefully cleaned the handbag, removing the coffee stains without damaging the material. The woman was amazed by the results and asked Maria where she had learned such skills. When Maria explained her background in household management, the woman became very interested. The woman introduced herself as Patricia Montgomery, the owner of a high-end event planning company that specialized in luxury parties and corporate functions. She was impressed by Maria's professionalism and asked if she would be interested in working some of their upcoming events. The pay was good, and while the work would be irregular, it could provide Maria with income while she continued, looking for a permanent position. Patricia gave Maria her business card and scheduled an interview for the following day. As Maria walked back to her hotel that evening, she felt like a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. This was not the traditional job she had been seeking, but it was an opportunity to use her skills and earn money while keeping her options open. That night, Maria called her family for the first time since losing her job. She did not mention the problems at the Henderson house, but told them about the new opportunity she had found. Her mother's voice was weak but filled with pride when she heard that Maria was continuing to work hard and take care of herself in the big city. As she prepared for bed, Maria reflected on how quickly her life had changed in just 2 days. She was learning that sometimes when one door closes, it forces you to look for windows you never noticed before. She was also discovering that she was stronger and more adaptable than she had given herself credit for. The next morning, Maria dressed carefully for her interview with Patricia Montgomery. She chose her most professional outfit and practiced explaining her skills and experience. She felt nervous but excited about this new direction her life was taking. She had always been good at adapting to new situations, and this would be another test of her resilience. The interview went better than Maria had hoped. Patricia was impressed by her attention to detail, her experience with luxury items, and her calm professionalism under pressure. She offered Maria a position as a freelance event assistant, starting with a high-profile corporate party the following weekend. The pay was more than Maria had made in a month at the Henderson house, even though it was just for one event. As Maria left Patricia's office with a contract in her hand, she felt like her life was finally moving in a positive direction again. She did not know that this job would soon put her in the path of someone who would change her life in ways she never could have imagined. The corporate event that would change Maria's life was being held at the city's most exclusive hotel, a gleaming tower of glass and marble that reached toward the clouds. When Maria arrived for her first day of work with Patricia's event planning company, she was amazed by the scale and luxury of the setup. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ballroom ceiling, and fresh flowers from around the world decorated every surface. Patricia had explained that this was a celebration for Blackstone Industries, one of the largest investment firms in the country. The company was marking its 50th anniversary with a party that would host over 300 guests, including business leaders, politicians, and celebrities. Maria's job was to coordinate with the catering staff, ensure that the decorations remained perfect throughout the evening, and handle any unexpected situations that might arise. As Maria worked alongside the other event staff, she felt energized by the fast-paced environment. Unlike her previous job, where she worked alone and unnoticed, here she was part of a team focused on creating something spectacular. Her experience with luxury items and attention to detail quickly made her valuable to Patricia, who began giving her more responsibilities as the day progressed. The guests began arriving at 7 in the evening, and Maria was struck by the elegance and confidence of everyone who walked through the doors. The men wore expensive suits that probably cost more than she made in a year, and the women glided across the marble floors in designer gowns that sparkled under the ballroom lights. Maria had seen wealth before at the Henderson house, but this was different. This was power and success on a completely different level. As the evening progressed, Maria found herself managing a crisis when the floral arrangements on the main stage began wilting under the hot stage lights. She quickly coordinated with the florists to replace them without disrupting the speeches that were taking place. Her calm efficiency caught the attention of several guests, including some who complimented Patricia on her excellent staff. It was during this moment of success that Maria first noticed him. A tall man in his early 30s stood near the bar, speaking quietly with a group of older businessmen. Unlike many of the other guests who seemed eager to network and make impressions, he appeared relaxed and genuinely interested in the conversations he was having. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and he wore his expensive suit with an ease that suggested he was completely comfortable in this world of luxury. What caught Maria's attention was not his obvious wealth or good looks, but the way he treated the service staff. She watched as he thanked the bartender by name, asked a waiter about his family, and stepped aside to let the catering staff pass without making them feel invisible. In a room full of powerful people who barely acknowledged the workers around them, his consideration stood out like a beacon. Maria was adjusting a flower arrangement near the bar when she accidentally knocked over a glass of champagne, spilling it across the marble floor. Her heart sank as she remembered the last time she had made such a mistake, but before she could panic, the man she had been watching stepped forward to help. He grabbed several napkins from the bar and began cleaning up the spill alongside her. "Don't worry about it," he said with a warm smile. "These things happen at every event. I'm David, by the way. David Blackstone." Maria felt her face turn red as she realized she had just spilled champagne in front of the son of the company president, the guest of honor at this entire celebration. She tried to apologize, but David waved away her concerns and continued helping her clean up the mess. When other guests tried to get his attention, he politely asked them to wait until they had finished taking care of the spill. "I'm Maria," she said quietly, still embarrassed by her clumsiness. "Nice to meet you, Maria. You're doing a great job tonight. I've been watching how smoothly everything is running, and I can tell you're a big part of that success." His genuine compliment surprised her. In her experience, wealthy people rarely noticed the work that went into making their events successful, let alone acknowledge the staff responsible for it. As they finished cleaning up the champagne, Maria found herself looking into David's eyes and seeing something she had not expected: genuine kindness and respect. Their conversation was interrupted when Patricia appeared, clearly worried about what had happened. She began apologizing profusely to David, but he quickly reassured her that everything was fine and that Maria had handled the situation perfectly. Patricia looked relieved and impressed, giving Maria an approving nod before hurrying away to address another issue. "She seems like a good boss," David said, watching Patricia coordinate with the catering staff. "She is," Maria replied. "This is actually my first event with her company. I'm still learning how everything works." "Well, you're a natural. Have you been in event planning long?" Maria hesitated, not sure how much to share about her background. "I'm new to this industry. I previously worked in household management for a private family." David nodded thoughtfully. "That must have given you good experience with organization and attention to detail. Those skills definitely translate well to this kind of work." As the evening continued, Maria found herself crossing paths with David several times. Each interaction was brief but pleasant, and she began to notice that he seemed to be making an effort to check on how she was doing. When she was struggling to move a heavy floral arrangement, he appeared to help. When she looked tired after hours of running around in heels, he quietly arranged for one of the other staff members to bring her a glass of water. Near the end of the evening, as the guests were beginning to leave and the staff was starting the cleanup process, David approached Maria one final time. She was carefully packing away the crystal centerpieces when he appeared beside her. "I wanted to thank you for your hard work tonight," he said. "You helped make this evening special for my family and our company." "It was my pleasure," Maria replied, surprised by how easy it was to talk to him despite their different backgrounds. "I hope this won't be the last time we work together," David said, handing her his business card. "Patricia mentioned you might be available for future events. I'd like to make sure our company considers your team for our upcoming functions." As Maria looked at the elegant business card in her hand, she felt a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had no idea that this chance encounter would lead to opportunities she had never dared to dream of, or that David Blackstone would soon become much more than just another wealthy client. In the weeks following the Blackstone Industries event, Maria's life began to transform in ways she had never anticipated. Patricia was so impressed with her performance that she offered her a permanent position as an event coordinator, with a salary that was 3 times what she had earned at the Henderson mansion. More importantly, David had kept his word about recommending Patricia's company for future Blackstone events. Maria found herself working on increasingly prestigious projects. She coordinated charity galas for prominent foundations, managed corporate retreats for international companies, and organized private parties for wealthy families. Each event brought new challenges and opportunities to learn, and Maria discovered she had a natural talent for managing complex situations under pressure. What surprised her most was how frequently David appeared at these events. At first, she assumed it was coincidence. After all, wealthy people in the city all seemed to travel in similar circles. But she began to notice that he would always make time to speak with her, asking about how the event was going and if she needed any assistance. His interest seemed genuine, not the casual politeness she was used to from other wealthy clients. During a charity auction for children's literacy programs, Maria was managing the silent auction tables when a dispute arose between 2 bidders over a valuable painting. The situation was becoming heated, and other guests were starting to stare. Before Maria could figure out how to handle the confrontation diplomatically, David appeared at her side. "Gentlemen," he said calmly, addressing both bidders, "I think there might be some confusion about the bidding process. Maria, could you explain how the silent auction works?" With David's support, Maria was able to resolve the situation professionally, explaining the rules clearly and helping both men understand that there had been a simple misunderstanding about timing. The confrontation ended with handshakes and good humor, and the auction continued successfully. "Thank you," Maria said to David afterward. "I wasn't sure how to handle that without making them feel embarrassed." "You handled it perfectly," he replied. "You just needed someone to help redirect their attention. That's something you learn in business. Sometimes people get so focused on winning that they forget the real purpose of what they're doing." Their conversations were becoming longer and more personal. David shared stories about growing up in a wealthy family and the pressures that came with being expected to join the family business. Maria told him about her village, her family's struggles, and her dreams of someday opening a restaurant. She was surprised by how easy he was to talk to and how genuinely interested he seemed in her background and goals. "You know," David said during one of their conversations, "I've been thinking about your restaurant idea. Have you ever considered that your event planning experience might actually be perfect preparation for running a restaurant? Both businesses are about creating experiences, managing logistics, and keeping customers happy." Maria had never thought about it that way, but as David explained the connections between her current work and her future dreams, she began to see possibilities she had not considered before. He suggested she start taking business classes in her spare time and even offered to connect her with restaurant owners who might be willing to share their experiences and advice. The turning point in their relationship came during a corporate retreat that Patricia's company was managing for a technology firm. The event was being held at a luxury resort outside the city, and Maria was staying on site to coordinate the 3-day program. On the second evening, she was walking through the resort gardens, taking a break from the dinner reception when she encountered David sitting alone on a bench overlooking the lake. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. "It's so peaceful out here." "Please do," David replied, moving over to make room for her on the bench. "I was just thinking about how rarely I get to enjoy quiet moments like this." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the moonlight reflect on the water. Eventually, David began talking about the challenges of living up to his family's expectations and the pressure he felt to prove himself worthy of eventually taking over the company. Maria listened without judgment, offering thoughtful responses when he asked for her perspective. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I had grown up differently," David said. "You've worked so hard for everything you've achieved. Nothing was handed to you, and you've never given up despite facing real challenges. I admire that kind of strength." "Everyone faces challenges," Maria replied. "Yours might be different from mine, but that doesn't make them less real. The pressure to live up to expectations can be just as difficult as the pressure to meet basic needs." Their conversation continued late into the evening, and for the first time, Maria saw David not as a wealthy businessman, but as a person with his own doubts, dreams, and struggles. When he walked her back to the resort entrance, she felt like something fundamental had shifted between them. The next morning, David surprised her by offering to help with the event setup. He rolled up his sleeves and worked alongside the staff, moving chairs, arranging materials, and doing whatever needed to be done. Other executives at the retreat were shocked to see the president's son doing manual labor, but David seemed completely comfortable with the work. "You don't have to do this," Maria told him as they set up a presentation area together. "I know," he replied, "but I want to. Besides, I'm learning a lot about what goes into making these events successful. It's giving me a whole new appreciation for the work you and your team do." As the retreat came to an end, Patricia pulled Maria aside to tell her that several clients had specifically requested her for their future events. Word was spreading about her professionalism and problem-solving abilities, and her reputation in the industry was growing rapidly. But Maria found herself thinking less about her professional success and more about the conversations she had shared with David. On the drive back to the city, Maria reflected on how much her life had changed. Since that terrible day when she was fired from the Henderson mansion, she had found work that challenged and fulfilled her, she was earning enough money to support her family comfortably, and she was building a reputation in an industry she was growing to love. But more than any of that, she had met someone who saw her as an equal, who valued her opinions, and who seemed to genuinely care about her dreams and aspirations. Little did she know that David was having similar thoughts, and that their growing friendship was about to evolve into something that would surprise them both and challenge everything they thought they knew about love, class, and what was possible when two people from different worlds found common ground in shared values and mutual respect. The invitation arrived on expensive cream-colored paper with elegant gold lettering. David had personally asked Maria to attend a private dinner party at his family's estate, not as staff, but as a guest. She stared at the invitation for a long time, uncertain about what this meant for their relationship and nervous about entering his world as an equal rather than someone who worked behind the scenes. Patricia encouraged her to accept, lending her an elegant black dress and helping her prepare for an evening in high society. "You belong there just as much as anyone else," Patricia assured her. "David obviously sees something special in you, and you should trust his judgment about his own social circle." The Blackstone estate was even more impressive than Maria had imagined. The sprawling mansion sat on perfectly manicured grounds, with gardens that seemed to stretch on forever and a circular driveway lined with luxury cars. As Maria approached the front entrance, she felt intimidated by the scale and grandeur of everything around her. David met her at the door personally, looking handsome in a perfectly tailored suit. His face lit up when he saw her, and his genuine smile helped calm some of her nervousness. "You look beautiful," he said, offering his arm to escort her inside. "I'm so glad you came." The other guests were exactly what Maria had expected. Wealthy business leaders, socialites, and influential families that she recognized from newspaper society pages. As David introduced her around the room, she noticed some curious glances and whispered conversations, but David seemed completely unbothered by the attention their friendship was attracting. During dinner, Maria found herself seated between David, and a prominent banker's wife who seemed genuinely interested in hearing about her work in event planning. The conversation flowed naturally, and Maria began to relax as she realized that many of these people, despite their wealth, were dealing with similar challenges in their professional and personal lives. "David tells me you're planning to open a restaurant someday," said Mrs. Williams, the banker's wife. "That sounds like such an exciting venture. Have you given any thought to location or the type of cuisine you want to feature?" As Maria described, her vision for a restaurant that would serve traditional dishes from her homeland with a modern twist, she noticed that the entire table had grown quiet to listen. When she finished explaining her plans, several guests offered suggestions about potential locations, suppliers, and business connections that might be helpful. "You should definitely consider the waterfront district," suggested Mr. Chen, a real estate developer. "There's a lot of development happening there, and the demographics would be perfect for the kind of restaurant you're describing." After dinner, David gave Maria a tour of the mansion's gardens. The grounds were illuminated with soft lighting that made everything look magical, and they walked slowly along paths lined with flowering bushes and elegant sculptures. It was during this quiet walk that their relationship took a decisive turn. "I need to tell you something," David said as they stopped beside a fountain in the center of the garden. "These past few months of getting to know you have been the best part of my year. You've shown me what it means to work for something you believe in, and you've helped me see my own life from a completely different perspective." Maria felt her heart racing as she listened to his words. She had been developing feelings for David, but had tried to convince herself that nothing could come of their friendship given their different backgrounds and social positions. "I know our situations are complicated," David continued. "I know people will have opinions about us being together, and I know my family might not understand at first, but I don't care about any of that. I care about you, Maria. I want to see where this relationship could go if we're both willing to take the risk." Standing in the moonlit garden, surrounded by luxury that still felt surreal to her, Maria found the courage to be honest about her own feelings. "I care about you too," she said quietly, "more than I thought was possible. But I'm scared, David. We come from such different worlds. What if this doesn't work? What if your family never accepts me? What if I'm not strong enough to handle the pressure that would come with being with someone like you?" David took her hands in his, looking directly into her eyes with an intensity that made her believe every word he said. "You're the strongest person I know. You've already overcome challenges that would have defeated most people, and you've done it with grace and dignity. As for my family, they'll learn to love you the way I do because it would be impossible not to once they get to know you." Their first kiss happened naturally, without fanfare or dramatic declarations. It was gentle and sweet, filled with the promise of possibilities they were both excited and nervous to explore. As they stood together in the garden, Maria felt like she was living in a fairy tale, but also like she was exactly where she belonged. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of new experiences for Maria. David introduced her to his friends, took her to exclusive restaurants and cultural events, and made it clear to everyone that she was important to him. Some people were welcoming and curious about her background, while others were less accepting, but David never wavered in his support for their relationship. The real test came when David arranged for Maria to meet his parents. Mr. Richard Blackstone was a formidable businessman who had built the family empire from the ground up, while Mrs. Elizabeth Blackstone was a refined woman who was deeply involved in charitable work and social causes. Maria was terrified about making a good impression on people whose approval could determine the future of her relationship with David. The dinner was held at an exclusive private club, and Maria wore her best dress and practiced conversations in her mirror for hours beforehand. When she met David's parents, she was surprised by how normal they seemed despite their obvious wealth and power. Mr. Blackstone asked thoughtful questions about her work and background, while Mrs. Blackstone seemed genuinely interested in her family and her dreams for the future. David tells us you're interested in opening a restaurant, Mrs. Blackstone said over dessert. That's quite an ambitious goal. What inspired you to pursue that particular dream? As Maria shared the story of cooking with her grandmother and her vision for bringing her family's traditional recipes to a wider audience, she noticed both parents listening intently. When she finished, Mr. Blackstone leaned back in his chair with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "the restaurant business is incredibly challenging, but it's also one of the most rewarding industries for people who have the passion and dedication to succeed. Have you considered that your event planning experience might actually be excellent preparation for restaurant management?" The conversation continued in a positive direction, and by the end of the evening, Maria felt like she had passed some kind of test. As David drove her home, he was beaming with happiness about how well the dinner had gone. "They liked you," he said. "I could tell by the kinds of questions they were asking and the way they were really listening to your answers. My father doesn't usually spend that much time talking business with people unless he's genuinely interested in what they have to say." As Maria prepared for bed that night, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in such a short time. She had gone from being an invisible servant to building a successful career and falling in love with someone who saw her as an equal partner. But she also knew that the real challenges were just beginning, and that navigating a serious relationship across social and economic boundaries would test both of them in ways they could not yet imagine. 1 year later, Maria stood in the kitchen of her own restaurant, Abuela's Garden, watching the final preparations for the grand opening celebration. The space was everything she had dreamed of and more: warm lighting that highlighted the colorful murals depicting scenes from her homeland, tables made from reclaimed wood that gave the dining room a welcoming feel, and an open kitchen where guests could watch the chefs prepare traditional dishes with modern techniques. The path to this moment had not been easy. Despite David's support and his family's eventual acceptance, there had been obstacles that tested Maria's resolve and their relationship. Some members of high society had been cruel in their judgments, making snide comments about David's choice to date someone they considered beneath his social status. There had been newspaper articles that described Maria as a former maid in ways that felt deliberately diminishing, and social media posts that questioned her motives for being with David. But for every person who tried to tear them down, there seemed to be two more who supported their relationship and admired Maria's journey from poverty to success. Patricia had become like a sister to her, offering business advice and emotional support during the difficult times. David's parents had grown to genuinely care for Maria, with Mrs. Blackstone becoming one of her strongest advocates in social circles, where Maria initially felt unwelcome. The restaurant had become a reality through a combination of Maria's savings, a business loan, and an investment from David's family. But more importantly, it represented the culmination of everything Maria had learned about hard work, perseverance, and believing in herself. She had insisted on maintaining creative control and ownership of the business, wanting to prove to herself and others that her success was based on her own merit and abilities. As the first guests began arriving for the opening celebration, Maria felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement that reminded her of her early days in event planning. But this time, she was not working behind the scenes to make someone else's vision come to life. She was sharing her own story, her own culture, and her own dreams with the world. David arrived early, looking handsome in a suit, but more importantly, wearing the proud smile that had become so familiar to her over the past year. He brought with him a small group of investors and business